Okay, moving on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5, I guess, in the book, the cellular structure of life. So we looked into the molecular structure, so like 4 biomolecules, how these 4 biomolecules, the lipids, the proteins, the nucleic acids, and sugars, carbohydrates, they come in together and make up life as we know it, right? So now we will try to look into the cellular structure of life, and by cellular structure I mean the cells, right? So like if every life is made up of cells, and that cellular structure. So what I will not do in here is go into biology, like hardcore biology, in which we discuss about the cell structure, the cell organelles. We're not going to do that. Excuse me. But what we will do is try to understand why the cell is important, what are the basic or the fundamental units of cell that are important for us to understand life and origin of life. Okay. Now, what we see on Earth is, so we are talking about cellular structure. So life on Earth, what can we say about the life on Earth? Like what specific things can we say about the life on Earth? With the discussion that we have till now. And right, so like all those biomolecules all we discussed. What this brings out is, and all the other things, is a very specific type of structure and functions, properties that we associate with life. It's a very specific type. So imagine that you have a toolkit, okay, and all life forms on Earth have used that toolkit to make the life. So it's a box with certain kinds of things: carbon, CHNOPS, water, some kind of energy mechanism, all that. It's coming from the same toolkit, but different types of life forms are taking that same toolkit and making life, right? Now, so you can imagine that all these and all this is a toolkit. You can also imagine this as the universal terrestrial toolkit. This. The question that we have to think about is this the only toolkit available in entire universe? Or there are other toolkits? So why are we calling it universal terrestrial? Because all forms of terrestrial life are making life which is carbon based, life which is liquid based, liquid water based, life which needs CHNOPS, and some others. But all of them are from the same toolkit. But my question is this Earth specific or is this universal? We don't know that yet. Because the laws of mathematics and physics, laws of physics, not mathematics. Mathematics is a language of expressing those laws, right? So laws of physics have been seen to be the same in different planetary bodies, in different galaxies. Everywhere else in the universe is the same. Even the laws of chemistry have been seen to be more or less the same. There are some exotic things going on, but the laws of chemistry by which they are bonding and everything, they are the same. But the rules, the laws of biology has not been tested yet. So that is what we are trying to that is cutting edge, as you can say. Okay. To understand whether biology exists or what type of biology exists in a different planetary world, or what kind of different toolkit other worlds might have, or if you can detect life on different worlds, we need to just have a clear idea about what does life look like on Earth. We'll have to just figure that thing out, right? And that brings us to the discussion of cell, because that's what life looks like on Earth. So the cell is the fundamental unit of life on Earth. For example, what is the quanta of light called? The photon, right? The quanta of life is a cell. You can think of life as that way. You cannot have anything that you can say is alive that is inside the cell. So you can have a cell that one cell could be called an organism or life, but anything that is inside of it we don't call it life. So that is the smallest unit of life that we define. So this is the smallest unit of life, the cell. Now there could be different types of cells, okay? But what is also interesting, so what is the meaning of a cell? What are the other meanings of cell? No, from English point of view.
Like a battery.
Okay. That is one definition. What are the others? A cell. What is that? Structure. What kind of structure? An open structure? It's a closed structure. So I think if you go and look into the dictionary definition of cell, a closed structure is also something that will be used. A battery was interesting because we will see why that definition also is very nicely fitting into this. But for now, this closed structure is very important, and I think this is one of the primary reasons we are calling it a cell. Okay, so this closed structure is allowing us to do what? What will a closed structure allow you to do? When you enclose a structure, what immediately happens?
Like no mass will go outside, or
There is a boundary. It's a boundary between the inside and the outside. Okay? Without this boundary, you cannot have life. You need to create this boundary somehow. We have not seen any life form that does not have a boundary. There is always an inside and an outside in a cell. What is the other function of a closed structure? To concentrate those biomolecules that is needed for life. So to concentrate not just the biomolecules, the essential chemicals. Now this cell also as a protection, protect the machinery that is inside. You can imagine that this cell is not just a passive soup of chemicals. It's an active machinery. It's a factory that is inside. It is doing things, right? So protect the machinery that is there in the inside from the maybe the harsh environment. So cell has different functions. This will be important if you are thinking about life on Europa. So if the European Ocean is hazardous, you would need to protect the life. So that cell is going to protect the insides from the outsides. Okay, so cells become important. So this is one of the important things for us to think about. The other things are relatively simple. We already discussed this. So the other things will be why water. So we briefly touched upon this in the previous class. Also, what are the different elements, CHNOPS, right? The simple answer to these is they are abundant, right? So why do we need this? Because they are abundant, right? The other thing is they form stable covalent bonds. That's why you need these. So they can form complex bonds right, the CHNOPS, and they have, we saw this thing in the molecular structure. This was the second, right? The third is the complexity problem when we think about life. Life is very complex. So when universe actually formed, what did you have during the Big Bang? Yes, even before hydrogen they were even simpler, but let's start from hydrogen. There was only one thing, that was hydrogen, and it stayed like that for millions and billions of years, right? Then you started to form helium. Then, so lithium also formed during the Big Bang, so I'm not going into that. So beryllium, magnesium, or boron, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, these started to form. So how universe moves is universe stays simple for a long period of time and then gets one step and becomes a little bit more complicated. Becoming more complicated is difficult. When you become more complicated, that means you are increasing entropy or decreasing entropy? Huh?
Becoming complex.
Complex. So you have all these simple things. Maybe this is not the right way of thinking into things. But the thing is, we discussed this in the second chapter. The entropy for the life thing. Life needs order. So the entropy needs to decrease. But we know from the laws of thermodynamics that what is the universe doing? It is always increasing the entropy. So it is going towards disorder. So universe wants to go towards disorder and life wants to go towards order. That's the challenge. Right? So this is what you will see in the universe many times. So it stays simple for a very long period of time and then takes one step forward and becomes complicated. So that's what happened. So it stayed only hydrogen for a very long time and then became complicated just a little bit with all these elements. So the thing is, when it becomes more and more complicated, two things happen. A, it takes a long period of time to become complicated. And second, the amount that is becoming complicated is just a small fraction. So for another example, our solar system is 99.98% by mass what? Huh? Hydrogen, sun, right? Most of it is that. But we know that our solar system it's not just that. We have all these rocky planets made up of a lot of silicates. So we have a lot of rocky planets to do that. We have the gas giants. There are a lot of hydrogen, but still there are other complicated gases. But the rocky planets are more complicated. Then we have life on Earth, which is even more complicated, which is carbon based. And you can just imagine how complicated life is. Like even a very simple single-celled organism is super complicated. So this complexity is very difficult to achieve. The other important thing about this complexity is this is completely abiogenic complexity. What I mean by that, so this is coming completely from abiogenesis, which means this is not coming from life itself, or at least for the first life that we are talking about. Okay, this is the first life that we are talking about. So something happened that took that chemistry and turned it into biology, if you put it very simplistically. This is very, very difficult. So you can form biomolecules, but to get all these different biomolecules in a very typical way and then convert it into a functioning single cell is extremely complicated. And then think about the added complexities of DNA replication. We having different kinds of organs in our body to do very specific things. The amount of complexity is, I don't think if there is anything else, this is this complicated. Like life is the most complicated thing that I think exists, or certainly one of the most complicated things that there exists. We don't know a lot about life. Just trying to understand, right? So how did non-living chemicals become cell? That is very important. Okay. Now, let's move into thinking about the cell. Now, let's talk about like the basic definition. So, for our purposes. So we'll think of this as a package that contains major life molecules. And we saw these life molecules. Right? So now our job is to take all those life molecules, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, and sugars, and then bring it enclose it in one unit. Right? So we are increasing that complexity. The other thing is, when you have a cell, there are primarily three things that we will be looking at. But before that, let me just tell you about compartmentalization. It's a very intuitive term, right? Compartmentalization. You have different compartments, right? So probably you'll have some of these compartments inside the cell, right? Some of them will be similar, some of them will be different. All these different compartments will have a specific function. So different compartments these will have specific functions. And also, cell does not necessarily have to be spherical or circular in shape. Okay? It does not. So the other thing is, cell is not disc shaped. Cell is a sphere. We are looking at a cross section. That's another thing to keep in mind. This is a 3D structure. It's not a 2D structure. That's one thing. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be a sphere. It could be of any shape. Okay, I'm not getting into the shell structures. Now, these different compartments have different functions. If you were in a biology class, you would be reading these as the cell organelles. Okay, I will not get into that. This is not going to be a repeat of whatever you learned. Maybe it's a little bit of a revision, but definitely not a repeat. Now, within these cells, so this area is called what? Like that empty space? Cytoplasm. So that's what it's called, the cytoplasm. Now, this cytoplasm will be hosting these different cell organelles, and each of these cell organelles will have their own boundaries. Okay. Now, there could be also this compartmentalization has become so important in the discussion of origin of life research and in literature, that some people have thought that compartmentalization is one of the most, this is a necessity for life. You cannot have life without this compartmentalization. So you need to have a cell, but inside that cell you need this compartmentalization of these different sets of chemicals or sets of molecules that do very specific functions. So this compartmentalization has been now thought of or discussed as one of the key requirements for life. Okay. Now, let's look into two very basic definitions of life. You probably have heard it. So we will have cells. We will have two types of cells. So we will have prokaryotic cells and you will have eukaryotic cells. Whenever you have this name pro, that means it is the older one, the simpler one, the earlier one, something like that. Okay, so the prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. Now, you may have seen these kinds of diagrams, right? This is a phylogenetic tree of life, right? So if you have, and we will look into this in detail later. So you have the bacteria, you have the archaea, and you have the what? Eukaryotic organisms or eukarya. These are the three domains of life. So these are the three domains of life. So this gets into phylogenesis, phylogenetic trees and so on. So we will discuss it when the time comes. For now, understand that the bacteria and archaea all have prokaryotic cells. So bacteria and archaea, they will have prokaryotic cells. Eukarya will have eukaryotic cells. easy to remember. It's like names are similar, but think about, like, be very clear about prokaryotic cell type and eukaryotic cell type, and eukarya, archaea and bacteria are the 3 domains of life. So where do you think we are? Are we bacteria, archaea, or eukarya? We are eukarya, because these are single cell, these are simple organisms. Eukarya, plants are eukarya, fungi is eukarya, animals are eukarya, so all these are in here. Okay. These archaea, this will become very important, because when we discuss about the LUCA, or the last universal common ancestor, an archaea is many organisms that live in extreme environments. For example, extreme high temperatures, or extreme low temperatures, or extreme saline environments, or acidic environments, or alkaline, anything extreme radiation. Most of the time we have seen that they are eukaryas. Now, not all archaeas. Not all archaeas will be extremophiles, but most of the extremophiles that we have seen are all archaeans. Okay. Now, if you think, if their life exists on Mars, what type of life do you think is more likely? Bacteria, archaea, or eukarya? Why? Extreme environment. Now, my other question is, and this is not just to you, just for in general, what might be extreme for us might not be extreme for a Martian. Right? So how do we know what? Maybe they have different kinds of complicated machinery, because they've adopted to those kinds of things, right? So we don't know. Maybe, just maybe, we think they may be similar to the archaea because of extreme environments. But that extreme has a star. What is extreme for me? The extreme hot in here might not be extreme hot for the people living here, but it would be very bad for, like, extreme for people living in Maine, and the opposite to us, right? So the other thing is prokaryotic cells are single-celled. They are single-celled. I'm just getting confused. They don't have nucleus, so no nucleus. These can also be single-celled, eukaryotic, right? So we are not getting into single versus multicellular. We are looking into 2 single cells, and we are trying to look into the difference. A prokaryotic cell will have no nucleus. An eukaryotic cell will have a nucleus. This is most of the life on Earth. This is not, this is special. There are more prokaryotic organisms. That means there are more bacteria and more archaea than we have these kinds of eukaryotic organisms. So this is the most common life form on Earth. Okay. Now these necessarily are single-celled. Okay, and we already saw that they make up bacteria and the archaea. Okay. With this, let's look into what these different cells are made up of, what are the different structural units of these cells, and a few things that I call like cell theory. Okay, so let's look into that.